to Joni and Helen.
Thank you, Celynn. And it is fantastic that we can do these things technically these days across the waters and across the world. Helen, I love to use the golden circles, the why, what, and how. So why Learning Innovation Africa? What gave birth to this? What ignited this idea?
Well, I have been involved in a Canadian-based company, and the founders were here in South Africa in February, and she just come from the Learning Technology Conference in London, and Christine Tatzel was raving about the Learning Technology Conference, and she said there were so many people, they were literally hanging off the chandeliers. And I decided, and she spoke about some of the innovations that she saw and some of the way in which the content was delivered. And I just looked around in South Africa and I looked at some of the conferences, and no disrespect to some conference organizers, because obviously some of them are very rich in content, but I just felt that there was something missing. And obviously moving more into the learning technology space, I decided it was time to put on my networking hat, my learning technology hat, and come up with something new.
Okay, superb. So this is on the 20th and 21st of September. It's approaching the last quarter of the year, so people are busy. How are you going to get them there? What are some of the very big differences in this conference? What makes it so vastly innovative and different?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is all the presentations are 18-minute TED Talk style presentations. Secondly, I'm putting on my networking hat and operating from the premise that the wisdom is actually in the room. And that by the time you leave at the end of the second day, you will have had an opportunity to meet with your peers, to literally meet everyone. So it's not going to be a kind of conference where you walk in the door with your name badge and you go and sit with all your colleagues at the same table. They're going to be set seating, they're going to be groups. So Accelerated Learning is the two women have written a book, and they specialize in how to make people learn 3 times faster. And they're going to be weaving some of their techniques during the 2 days into the conference. So the conference is almost going to be a little case study of how you can make people or help them to learn faster and also embed some of their principles. So they're going to do a lot of the facilitation. So really it's going to be short, sharp, and sweet. Maximum peer-to-peer networking and learning, lots of case studies, because I believe that as South Africans we have a lot of wisdom that we're not sharing with each other, from organization to organization and also within industries. So I'm really going to encourage people to tell their war stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that we can learn from each other.
I see that the whole agenda is laid out like that. So the international experts, the afternoons are very experiential with case studies and World Cafe and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who are the big names we have at this conference?
Well, Joni Petty and Celynn Erasmus, of course.
It's a fair conference.
Indeed, indeed. And I'm really excited about your involvement in it, to weave some of your techniques into making it a living example of fab. So, but I think, so Christine Tatzel and her colleague Craig Wall are coming from Canada. They're going to be speaking about micro-learning and gamification and how learning and development is being disrupted. And that's why one of the taglines I used is that learning is being Ubered, because learning is being Ubered, and if you don't realize that, then you need to come, especially urgently. But I think a lot of people are realizing that the days of people sitting in workshops and classrooms for hours on end are at an end. People don't have the bandwidth, and they also don't have the time.
Yeah.
So micro-learning, gamification, I did a lot of research amongst my clients as to what they wanted to see. So things like, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, big data, the cloud, how that's going to impact, your ability to be innovative. Brad Shawkin is going to be speaking about how do you make a team or an organization innovation ready, which is going to be really interesting. Graham Codrington is going to be speaking about how do you teach your millennials that are coming through as young talent. And Isaac Nkama is a really, really interesting man who has a vast experience in Africa, and he's going to be speaking about how do you do business in Africa, because a lot of the companies that are coming have got head offices or headquarters here in South Africa, but how do you then take your learning kind of ecosystems and spread them throughout Africa without being perceived as being arrogant South Africans? And he's going to give some interesting input into that.
So big names. Let's drill down on one of them. Could be gamification or augmented reality. But I know a lot of people that I'm speaking to say that sounds funky, but practically how can we enable that in businesses? So either one of those two, just to expand on it.
Well, let me take gamification because it's an issue very close to my heart. So gaming really fits into three buckets. You can have kind of simulation-based gaming, which is, often in high-risk situations. Ideally, you'd like your pilot to have been on a flight simulator before they pilot your plane. Secondly, there's game-based learning, where the learning is linked to the game. Now, I've been in 6 meetings in the last kind of 6 weeks where companies are doing that. It's very popular in South Africa right now. The only problem that I'm seeing is that very expensive, all over time, all over budget. And the problem is once you launch a game, you almost, as a company, have to have a game development team as part of your you know. So that is a big kind of cost. And also because they're not gaming companies, they don't really know how to make games fully appealing. And the problem is once they launch a game, then often people get bored with paying it, in the kind of the first 3 weeks. So gamification is a very hot learning strategy where the game or the skill that you're trying to build is not in any way linked to the game. The game becomes an engagement strategy because all the neuroscience is showing that when you release dopamine, or when you play a game, your brain releases dopamine, and that is us in our most receptive learning state. And that's why we are able to retain information in a very powerful way, and that's why gamification and learning has become such a hot topic.
And I was just reading today that Candy Crush, their revenue per day is over $600,000 from gamification. So, it is a huge fun area to explore. The South African companies, are there international experts? I believe Demystifying could obviously offer that will come in who really have expertise on how to keep it evolving and exciting and people don't get bored.
Absolutely. And, Demystify, for example, they have 42 different types of games on their platform because the one thing they've realized about gamification is different ages like different types of games. So your over 40s will prefer more brain teaser type games, where your under 40s prefer more arcade type style games. So, but what is interesting, very little difference between men and women, and women are the biggest. Women of the age of 40 are in fact the biggest growing gamer generation.
Gee, that's us.
Exactly. Well, it was interesting. I was on the car train the other day, and 3 women around me were all playing Candy Crush, and they've all fitted into that category.
Okay. No, it's fantastic. It's fantastic how they can monetize it as well. Helen, in terms of delegates really moving around in the day, what's the style? Let's talk. We've spoken about the why, we've spoken about the how you came about this, but what's going to happen day by day? So it's 2 days, it's jam-packed. People are not sitting in a conference room waiting for the next, even though it's 80 minutes, TED Talk. How's it going to work ergonomically?
So lots of movement.
Yeah.
I said to people it's going to be a bit like a Catholic Mass. Now, if you've ever been to Catholic Mass, you don't sit still for 2 minutes. So really that's going to be the premise. So keeping it, so lots of activations that you guys are going to do, great healthy food. I've got some surprises up my sleeves. There is going to be a flash mob, and we're going to have a choir kind of exercise. So it's really going to be like a learning rock concert. A lot of music. And in fact, music is going to be the punctuation marks. So every time we swap topic, there's going to be a powerful YouTube clip. There's going to be something inspirational from a music perspective, because I believe you need to appeal to people's senses when they're learning.
Absolutely.
So a lot of movement. And as I said, through the accelerated learning girls, they are going to, be weaving some of their techniques into the day. The whole 2 days is going to be gamified. So there will be a participation app that everyone gets to use, and you're going to accumulate points and their leaderboards, and people are going to be actively competing during the 2 days.
Which we love to do.
Yes, absolutely. And prizes, and there's going to be a great prize at the end. So as I say, I'm trying to take learning and making it and packaging it in a very entertaining way.
Superb. Where to from here? Let's just kind of look at end of September. This is done and dusted. It's been a huge success. You've got captains of industry all having attended. Is this an annual event? Will you take it into Africa? What will you do?
Yeah, I think preferably both. And because I think that this first year it's been primarily more South African based, and next year I'd want to change the focus. There are some travelers who are coming, and a lot of the organizations that are coming are multinational. So there have been a lot of requests already to take this in smaller ways out on the road. So that will definitely be a goal for next year. And then I'd like to make it an annual event.
Yeah, superb.
Because I think that Abdullah Varacha has a saying. He says, if your rate of learning is not faster than the rate of change, then you run the risk of becoming extinct. So, and I can guarantee you by this time next year, there will be some significant advances, and it's a question of keeping up.
Yep. And maybe even taking LIA into the micro learning. So taking the 2-day conference and micro learning it into bite-sized pieces around the country, around Africa. Fantastic.
Indeed, yeah. I think it's kind of it's LIA will become a value system. One is the great African expertise that we sit with, to share it with each other in an entertaining way. I think as Africans, we have a great ability to, you think of the World Cup, you think of some of the places where we really have shone, and I intend to harness that.
And we're not very good at cross-fertilizing ideas. Amongst peers, we kind of hold our cards quite close to our chest. So that abundance of, let's actually look at these case studies. What are some of the case studies we'll enjoy at the conference?
Well, IBM is coming, and they're going to be speaking about how Watson is impacting learning from an artificial intelligence perspective. So that's going to be really interesting. And they're doing some fascinating projects in South Africa and into Africa and in the world. So that's going to be a big international one. Clover, which is a homegrown brand. USB Ed, which is Stellenbosch Business School, they're going to be showcasing some of the innovations that they're doing there, which apparently have had a significant impact on the learning culture there. Flight Centre is also going to be there, and they're going to be showing how they have, especially around micro-learning and some really exciting innovations, both internationally and locally. And lastly, the First Rand Group are going to show how they're Ubering training, because they're also doing some really exciting stuff. So people are operating from that abundance mentality. It's one of the value systems that I uphold. I think you both uphold it. That's why we all work well together. And Leah will people who buy into the brand will buy into that value system.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do a time check, because I just wanted to make sure that we don't run over. And as a reminder, people who have just joined in, please feel free on your panel on the right to click on the little icon that says questions and to type up any questions, because Celynn is going to be looking at those, and then in about 5 minutes time I'm going to hand over to Celynn, and she will just categorize and gather those questions together so that we can ask Helen, or the attendees, you can ask Helen some questions from your point of view, because you are all muted. Helen, in terms of artificial intelligence, I mean, give us a little snippet around that, because I find that fascinating, also from a neuroscience perspective. What have you seen that's really caught your eye in the market that said, gee, these people are ahead of the game using artificial intelligence for innovation and learning?
Well, I think the most exciting developments in learning are happening when artificial intelligence meets virtual reality. That's really where kind of there's a sweet spot. Exactly. So one of the examples I came across the other day is one of the international hotel chains. What they're doing is, the way they're training all their hotel managers is they're putting on headsets, and literally they're all sitting there, and then they're going on a tour of a hotel and troubleshooting as they're going, seeing what they're doing. So that's obviously a virtual reality, but apparently they're going to kind of piggyback artificial intelligence onto this, and it's all in beta testing stages. So companies are experimenting with a lot of things, and that's why I think this conference has come at a good time, because what's working, what's not working, where are we seeing results, and how are we different, or how are we the same as what's happening internationally?
Yeah, actually I saw that with the Sheraton. They had travel agents have the virtual reality headset, so they could see the Sheraton in Hong Kong or Chicago. It didn't matter. So if they're booking their clients, they could say that's the experience you would get, and it's really quite phenomenal, those experiences.
I mean, Virgin Atlantic, who's one of my clients, they whenever their reps go now to see clients, they get them to put on the headset, and they can actually have an experience of what first class is like. Literally just using your seat, and then you almost get to feel the blanket, and apparently you get to smell what first class smells like. So there's a smell element to it. So so the virtual reality space is a very exciting space. The artificial intelligence, when you see what Watson can do, especially in terms of learning, you do wonder about the future of schools, universities, because I think we are obviously very focused on adult education, but I think that these concepts have got huge ramifications for the way in which our children are going to be educated.
Yeah, absolutely. Really exciting.
Yeah.
And then we can speak a little bit about fueling, activating, as well as the behavior, because that's the two parts of FAB. So it will not be sit-down lunches, heavy meals, and that will also be extraordinarily different. We're going to look at food that's going to be energizing, because what we do know in terms of retaining information in the brain is you need the right fuel in your brain to make sure that you can actually use the memory centers. So we'll be looking at the food side to make sure that that enhances the learning and also catalyzes some behavior change, we hope.
Indeed.
Because managing energy, we have a term Celynn and I use, that energy management is a new stress management. So we're yet to meet anyone in these industries who are especially kind of trailblazing new innovative thinking and new ways of doing things. It takes a huge amount of energy, a huge amount of collaboration. And if you don't understand yourself and manage yourself, you get worn out quite quickly. So the food will be different, the venue is different. So Turbine Hall,
kind of quite industrial,
yes,
in the middle of downtown Johannesburg. So we're going to arrange Uber vouchers for people. So literally from a learning is being Ubered, you will be able to Uber. And so I think it's a funky venue. I think it speaks to, and then what we're going to do is when there are case studies and fireside chats, which are happening in the afternoon, people are going to move into kind of quite dark rooms that have almost been made into kind of fireside, chats. So it's going to be intimate, no tables, everyone sitting around and really sharing. So it's going to be like in the bush in Newtown.
Yeah, lovely. Last conversation. So I think it's a good time now to kind of hand over to Celynn. Celynn, maybe you're unmute, and let's see who has questions for Helen.
Great. Thank you, ladies. Helen, I even have some questions for you, but there's some good questions that have come up. I think let's start with this one. For those who are attending the conference already or listening to the webinar now, who else in their organization should be coming along if they aren't?
Well, I think, there have been a lot of human capital people, so people are interested in, the future development of people in the organization. But what has been interesting, a lot of people involved in innovation in organizations are coming. And yesterday we had a whole team who represent customer experience at one of the leading banks. So it's, there are learning development, there are human capital, there are people interested in talent, and then innovation, customer experience. So it's been quite broad.
Okay. And this is a very good question. A lot of business schools, I know that you and ourselves, we do a lot of work in business schools. Buzz, who's posted this question, also does that. Does it mean that that kind of teaching style is a dying method? And what does that mean for them?
No, I don't think it's dying. I think it's changing. So I think that with micro-learning, with some of the gamification, some of the augmented reality, classroom time will never go away entirely, but I think it will be less. So I think effectively it's probably looking at being halved or maybe even, brought down to a third of what it currently is. So people will certainly spend time in the classroom, but I think the coming into a classroom cold, where you've done no work on a subject or whatever, is long gone. I think a lot of the learning will happen before you arrive in the classroom. So a lot of interesting discussion, because that's really what a classroom is for, is to foster that collaboration, that network, and then people will go out and do some other stuff and then come back again. So, increasingly I'm seeing, I think that is going to be a future of business schools, and I think the business schools who adapt to that model are going to be the ones that are successful.
Thank you for that. And I think this next question is a good bridge onto the answer that you just gave, is how do we encourage lifelong learning in corporations? So rather getting employees to actually seek out the knowledge as opposed to them being told that they need to go for training.
Yeah, I think it's Christine and Craig from Exonify are going to speak to this a lot at the conference, because a lot of their Exonify clients speak about their learning culture that has been created. And one of the ways in which you do it is to make learning interesting and sexy, especially for your millennials. So, I think that the days where learning sits in a learning development department are gone. So how do you crowdsource your content? How do you get the subject matter experts to have an innovative way to actually just post a question, drop an article, share something that they feel is very relevant to other people in your organization? So I think once you have that technology in place, that you can actually, that learning culture soon develops, and as I say, it becomes the culture.
And talking about the technology, sorry, Joni?
Sorry, Helen. Celynn, in what I've seen in some self-directed with holacracy is that I've seen exactly what Helen has said, is that learning is just in holacracy within the teams. It's not situated or held tightly in a department. So we want that filtrating right through. And that's got to be changed quite dramatically, because we have so many generations working together. Also, we've got the older generations who want to stay working for longer because they're living longer.
Yeah.
So we've got to keep everybody excited, not only the millennials, but the older people who are not known as dead wood, because they are contributing and adding tremendous value.
So on that point, there's a fascinating couple called Philip and Shelley Marsh, and they're going to be showing an app that they've developed in the mobile learning space, where exactly that. He was an old engineer, and he was seeing kind of these old retired engineers leaving, and there was no way for them to pass on their knowledge to young, talented grads. So this app actually connects the two of them together, and your retiring engineer, banker, investment banker, whoever, gets CPD points, actually gets a professional qualification, and his app has just won a huge award in India. So they're still in the beta testing phase in South Africa, but they're going to be, discussing kind of it, because that is going to foster that culture very powerfully.
Absolutely. Sorry, Celynn, there was another question.
Sure, Helen. So is that the name of the gamification system that's going to be spoken about at the conference? Are you able to share?
Which?
You mentioned that there's going to be a gamification. Oh, okay, Xanify.
Oh, no. The actual gamification app that we're going to be using at the conference is called UMU, U-M-U, and it's specifically designed, as a conference participation app. So all the speakers will be evaluated through that app. People will accumulate points. We can do raffles. We can do draws. So it's very user friendly.
Okay. And do you know of any, this links back to the question around the business school environment, do you know of any business schools that are using some of the techniques that are going to be discussed at LIA? So some of the latest neuroscientific teaching and learning methods. And are they going to be at the conference?
Basically all the business schools are represented there from what I've seen from our delegate list, but USB8, so Stellenbosch Business School, are one of the key sponsors, and one of the reasons why they wanted to come on board is they're doing some very innovative stuff, around gaming, around micro-learning, gamification, and in the case studies they're going to be sharing, some of their journey in that space. Okay. And they're also doing a lot of work into Africa using some very sexy innovations.
And they'll be talking and sharing about those.
Yeah, one of the things that they have been doing is they've just done key learning trend research into Africa, and they're going to be announcing the results at the conference. So what are some of the key learning trends that, are relevant in 2016 for organizations?
Sounds amazing. I can't wait. Helen, I know that you've traveled abroad, and so this is a question from me, and you've seen some very interesting developments when you've been abroad, like when you spent time with Google. Has some of what you've experienced abroad been part of the inspiration to do this? And anything in particular that stood out for you?
Well, I mean, one of the big things that struck me at Google was, I was there for a mindfulness conference, and I'm going to be doing a mindfulness session at LIA. So what was interesting, seeing how all the technology companies are using mindfulness, not just to build resilience, which I think the benefit is fairly obvious, but to build innovation, because they want their staff to think better. And if you are more mindful, you actually think better and you become more innovative.
Okay.
Space for creativity.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because, you know, and they spoke a lot. Jeff Weiner, who I'm a big fan of, the CEO of LinkedIn, he was one of the speakers at the Google conference, and he spoke about you know, buffer time. So he has a buffer time, you know, in the morning, and he has a buffer time in the afternoon, half an hour each kind of in each period. And no one is allowed to make meetings for him in that time, and that's where he gets to think big. And because unfortunately, if you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting the entire day, I can guarantee you've got no white space in your brain, and your thinking is compromised. And unfortunately, that is not going to be the mindset that is going to future-proof you or your organization.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure we'll learn many more techniques at the conference. I think we have time for one last question. It's the question is, do you have a recommendation for a company who does live game building? If not now, will there be somebody at the conference that the person can network with? And would they also be able to find out about protecting content, like in the form of NDAs, when you start sharing information like this? I think it's quite a specific question. Will there be people at the conference that could assist with building games?
I think there will be companies who have used those services. So I certainly think, especially in the case studies and in the fireplace, you know, fireside chats, you know, people will discuss their successes and their problems, and there have been problems. You know, and I'm sure that they would be able to make recommendations. You know, that space is not a space that we have engaged with, but certainly there'll be clients who are using the services of people like that. So they will certainly be able to make recommendations.
Thank you. I think that's all the time that we have for. It is just before 5:30. So unless you have one last comment before I wrap up, Helen, Joni?
Well, I just think, you know, learning is being Ubered, and and I look forward to Celynn, Joni, and for the awesome bunch of people that I've put together, and I really think it's going to rock this town, and I think we're ready.
It's hugely exciting. It's wonderful to be part of a first, so well done to you, the brainchild behind it. It takes a lot of chutzpah, I love that word, women vitality to get these things off the ground. It's no mean feat to get it coordinated and people from around the world to attend and present and get the agenda right, so well done. We will be chatting again on Tuesday the 6th at 5 o'clock. So for those of you who are on, I know many more people registered for today who haven't come on, but spread the word, because no two webinars are the same. You might learn more next time, but let's register for the Tuesday the 6th if you like. And more importantly, Helen, where do they go to register for the event?
You can go to our website, www.learninginnovationafrica.co.za.
Simple. Thank you. And thank you, Celynn, from across the
Joni,
world.
can you perhaps put up the website on the next slide? Because that was also a question that just came up. What is the website for seeing the agenda and more detail? Thank you. So there you have it, learninginnovationafrica.co.za. And this is definitely a rock concert that you do not want to miss out on. So come along, bring your colleagues and friends, and it'll be great to see you there. Thank you so much, ladies. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.